But look, we've got exactly 3 weeks. I mean, this thing is going to happen real fast. And I can't believe that election night was a whole week ago. And we only have 3 weeks left.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Policy Matters. I am Eric Allen.
And I'm Nicole Horn. Welcome back, everyone.
Thank you guys for giving us another listen. Hope you enjoyed the first episode. But tonight, we're going to talk about everything runoffs. We have some really big things going on with this election, Nicole.
Yeah, absolutely. So as a reminder, I know everybody knows we're in a runoff. If you don't remember, and Eric and I were just refreshing ourselves on the exact numbers. We're in this place because Senator Warnock got 49.4% of the vote, and Herschel Walker got 48.5% of the vote. And Georgia is one of the few states that require you to hit that 50% plus one threshold, or else we go to a runoff. And Eric, you were talking about you're a little concerned about this runoff. So tell me why.
Yeah, I am. It's one of those things where turnout was already fairly low in the general election. And I think that we're going to have to do a lot to turn people out to vote. And one of the things that's really been on the radar the last couple of days is this kerfuffle with the legislation that allows for weekend voting. And I know that if you're following the news, there was a lawsuit filed today by the Warnock campaign along with some other allies to try to clarify whether or not Saturday voting could be done. And, you know, in prepping for today, I was having a conversation with the Minority Whip in the House, Representative David Wilkerson, and recorded some of our conversation. Just want to play a little of that for the people so you can kind of get an idea of how we ended up where we are with this confusion around Saturday voting. All right, so we're here with State Representative David Wilkerson, who is the whip of the House Minority Caucus. And just wanted to bring you in, David, and kind of just get your understanding of where we are with the Saturday voting for the runoff. I know that there's been some talk back and forth on interpretation of whether or not it's because of the Thanksgiving holiday, whether or not it's because of Robert E. Lee Day on Friday. Was the word runoff struck it out? What, you know, all this stuff going on. What's your interpretation of where we are right now?
So great question. So I first became aware of this probably last week when we were talking about Saturday voting and reached out to some lawyers and asked, based on reading of the code, is a Saturday allowed after a holiday? And so, you know, you ask 10 lawyers something and some may say one thing, some say the other. But what ended up happening was the Secretary of State's office came out with a ruling and saying that Saturday voting is not allowed. So while they initially said Saturday voting was allowed and people could get started, once they looked at it, they said that their interpretation, I believe along with the Attorney General, was that Saturday voting after a holiday was not allowed. Now there's lawyers on the other side that say that only applies to a general and a primary. It does not apply to a runoff. So I think that's where we are right now is court action has been taken, litigation has been filed, saying that that the Secretary of State is reading it wrong. So I'm assuming some judge will rule, or the Secretary of State could change the position. But right now, it's really just lawyers see things differently. I mean, it's right. I know I do, and I know a lot of other people want that Saturday voting, want as much possible voting that we can have out there. The question is, what does the law say? And that's where, you know, they have to get clarification.
Yeah, and just for clarification on you know, kind of how we got here, this is the first time that we're having a runoff post SB 202, where yes, you know, we haven't been challenged with this before, but going forward, every 4-week runoff for November general is gonna fall in the same category. You're bumping up against Thanksgiving in order to do early voting. So some people have said, you know, was it an oversight? Was it, you know, something that one side knew about, the other side didn't? What's your take on that? Is this just bad legislation? Because that happens at the Capitol all the time.
It's bad legislation. 202 is a bad bill. There's no denying that. Whether this part is on purpose or by, some, accident, it's hard to say, because at the end of the day, you can still vote on Sunday. So
Right.
Sunday's still an option. So if they were up to, nefarious, bad intentions, they probably would have knocked out Sunday as well. So I think it's just one of those, situations where the people on the other side of the aisle decided they wanted to cram a almost 100-page bill down our throat and didn't fix certain things. Because with the runoff being 4 weeks, it is a tight time frame, especially with the election being so late. So the election wasn't until the 8th, which then pushes us in December. But back in the early 2010s, we actually had 4-week runoffs. So that was how it used to be back in the olden days. But
I was going to ask you about that, because I think a lot of people think the 4-week runoff is new, but we actually had 4-week runoffs, and then the federal courts got involved because the 4 weeks wasn't long enough for overseas ballots to be shipped and sent back, so it went to 9 weeks. So this is not a new process in Georgia. I think the only difference, would you say, is that now there's been language drawn in that prohibits that Saturday voting because of the holidays?
Exactly. And the question is, should we be one of the only states that has a runoff for these federal elections, or should we look at 45%? So I think that's part of the conversation as well, is if you've had everybody come out, does it make sense to come back to a low turnout election and pick your U.S. senator? So I think we may need to look at what other states are doing. But you're right, 4 weeks what it used to be. I think 4 weeks is a burden on everybody as far as if you have people traveling over the holidays. But it's just important that people get out and vote on one of those available days that we know we have, which is Sunday through Friday in a lot of communities.
Yeah, so I'm seeing now, as of midday, this is Tuesday, there's I know Fulton and I think 1 or 2 other counties have already set their schedule, assuming it's going to be Sunday the 27th through December 2nd. So you basically have 6 full days of early voting, because Sunday's not in question. It's only Saturday.
Correct.
That's in question. I think Sunday is going to be fine. Last question, because I know you'll be back at the Capitol. I won't. But do you think this is something that's going to come up and need to be fixed, or do you think it's just going to stay as is and we just have to litigate it to see if Saturday is pertinent?
It definitely needs to be fixed. At the end of the day, I think it's confusing. I did see one university professor say that it's confusing. You can see it either way. So in that case, the tie should go to the voter, meaning they should be allowed to vote on Saturday. But either way, I think for good policy, you got to go back in and fix this to clarify it.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. Anything else listeners should know about this, or just get out and vote? No matter
get
what.
out and vote. Now, I do know a couple of the counties have done separate resolutions. So they approved the Sunday through Friday voting, but then they came back and approved another resolution saying we will allow Saturday voting if the courts come out and say we can, or the Secretary of State says we can. So they've added that caveat in there so they can be prepared, and they're preparing their team to wait further action based on what they hear back from the courts.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, and we're going to talk a little bit later on the other part of the podcast about the origin of the runoff. You hit on it a little bit, but people need to know that we're one of the only states that doesn't have a plurality when it comes to those federal elections. That's why you can see other states selecting senators with 48, 49%.
Yep.
And we're stuck with 50% plus 1, but we'll talk about the history of that later. Well, thank you very much, Whip Wilkerson.
Thank you.
We'll probably have you on after all this settles to see what's going on for next session, but thank you very much.
We'd love to be back on. Thanks.
All right, man. All right. Well, I want to thank Whip Wilkerson for joining us and giving us that insight. Nicole, that really is the reason why I'm a little concerned right now, because we have very big ambiguity around whether or not we can vote on Saturday. And before we went to that clip, we were talking about just the runoffs in general.
Yeah.
And Georgia's one of the few states that has this 50% plus 1 in a runoff. And, people look at that and say, well, why do we do that? Well, the reality is that's an old 60s, really Jim Crow law to allow for people to consolidate after the general election for minority candidates to basically lose.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're stuck with it at least for now. And I think your fear is that Democrats will say, well, we've got the majority, we're just going to stay home, or feel the way, I mean, candidly, the way I feel, and I want everybody to go vote. I'm still going to be advocating for people to vote. But I am optimistic that Republicans will stay home because Walker is such an awful candidate.
Yeah,
where before they were like, I'm voting to get the Senate. Now they don't have that justification. So I think that is going to happen. But I think your concern is we need to make sure that definitely we just need more Democrats to get out than Republicans.
We do, and I think everybody's
going to.
Yeah, everybody's vote's going to be suppressed a little bit. I mean, you think about it. This is Tuesday, and we know tonight Donald Trump's going to announce his reelection for president. That's going to depress the vote. You know, to what you were saying earlier, Herschel Walker to win the majority made sense to a lot of people. Republicans were willing to put their principles and their politics aside just for power. But a Herschel Walker in the minority serves you no purpose. I just don't see Republicans turning back out the way that they would have if this were really for the control of the Senate. And the last thing I'll say on the turnout is, a lot of people looked at SB 202 and wanted to know why it was called a suppressive bill. I think we're really going to see one of the major mechanisms of voter suppression in this bill with the runoff. We are bumped up against a holiday weekend where that is the only opportunity for voting. So everybody listening, I mean, just understand you can apply today for your absentee ballot if you're going to be leaving town for Thanksgiving. But the only weekend where voting will be available is the 27th, which is a Sunday, and a lot of counties are implementing Sunday voting right now. So you'll have the Sunday, the 27th through December 2nd. And the only weekend
that you're in a county that has Sunday voting.
Absolutely. And if you're not in a county that doesn't have that weekend voting, you need to apply for your absentee ballot today. So that you have that in hand in case something comes up and you're not able to make it during the early vote period.
And the concern as we talk about kind of voter suppression, the reason why the weekend voting is so important, and y'all, I may be telling you things that you're like, Nicole, I know this, but I think a lot of us take for granted that not everyone has the flexibility to go and vote over lunchtime during the week, or has accessible transportation during the week, that you might have more opportunities on the weekend and more time on your hands on the weekend. And I think that's particularly true for some of our hourly workers. So we need this weekend voting, both Saturday and Sunday. And I'm glad to see us pushing for this. I saw an email go out I live in DeKalb County. Eric, you're in Cobb County. I saw an email go out where local Democrats were ready to push for Sunday voting because that's not a sure thing yet in DeKalb County. So,
well, it will be soon. I know a lot of the commissions. So it's 5:00 on Tuesday, and Cobb County Board of Elections just approved Sunday voting for the 27th. I know Fulton has already approved it and certified. So, by the time you listen to this, your county, if you live in the metro, it's highly likely that you're going to have access to Sunday voting. But if you're in a more rural area, it's probably not going to be an option. And without Saturday, that means your only opportunity to early vote would be the 28th, November 28th through December 2nd, which is kind of just a 5-day window for early voting. So, just to put a pin in it, this is very, very important that we turn out, that we support Reverend Warnock, that we get him back into the Senate. But we got to make sure we know the rules and what's going on. And, go out, make your plan to vote, make your plan to show up on Sunday or Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Get your absentee ballot, turn it in, whatever you need to do to make sure that you vote. But outside of voting, Nicole, there are a ton of ways to get involved with the different campaigns.
Before we dive into that, because I do want to dive into that, and y'all, we're also going to post all the ways to get involved in our comments. But Eric, let's talk about why getting Senator Reverend Warnock back to DC is important, because it's more than just,
Absolutely.
We've got the 50%. We've got it. So some people might be like, well, then why should I care? And you and I have talked about this. Eric, why should people care that we get one more Democrat into the Senate? Talk about that.
That is a great question. And this is Policy Matters. So we're going to dig into the policy and talk about some wonky stuff. But, you know, in the current Senate, when it's 50-50, there has to be power sharing agreements between the minority and the majority leader. The only thing that we have is a tie-breaking vote with the vice president. So all of the committees are all even. They are all 50-50 in these committees. There's no majority clearly in the Senate when it comes to committees and moving things out of committee. So the first reason why it's very important to send Senator Warnock back is that it gives us a clear majority, which means all committees will now have a clear Democratic majority, and we won't have to have any type of power sharing agreements with Mitch McConnell on what's going on. Now, I can tell you, the other reason that's very important is the president needs to continue to fill judiciary seats, and having that 51, that cushion of just one seat, makes a world of difference in getting those things done. It also strips the power away from any one senator like a Joe Manchin to slow down the agenda and not get anything done. So thank you for saying that, Nicole, because it's very, very important. You know, it's one thing to have 50-50. It is a completely different ball game to give our Senate, especially when we know that, you know, the House, for all intent and purposes, is probably going to be lost. To have a Senate that can do the work of the Senate and get these judicial appointments through and really take away the need to negotiate before you're even negotiating by doing the power share agreement. So very, very important that we get that 51st senator.
Yeah, and the judicial nominees, it's worth talking about that again, because y'all remember that Trump had time to pack the court, and he did. Mm-hmm. Trump has not only packed the Supreme Court, but we can see his appointments all the way down, and he's going to leave a legacy, a pretty negative, scary legacy. I mean, we saw a little bit of that when with the Mar-a-Lago documents, the FBI trying to get those documents back, and that one crazy judge giving Trump all the wiggle room in the world, and people were like, what is she doing? So even if we can't get the legislation that we want, and I would not give up on that, even if, when honestly they were just one away when we're recording this right now, Republicans have control of the House, it's not going to be by much. So we still have the opportunity to legislate. But regardless of legislation being passed, we need to make sure the judiciary has some great, progressive, thoughtful judges on the bench. So let's get them in there.
There are tons of ways that we can get involved and make sure that you do your part to get Senator Warnock reelected. So Nicole, run down some of the ways that people can get involved to make sure we get him reelected.
Okay, so my mantra is give your time, your talent, and or your treasure. One or more of those things. So in terms of your treasure, if you want to make donations, you can donate directly to the Warnock campaign. But you can also donate, let's say you've maxed out your donation to the Warnock campaign, which I would
God bless. God bless.
But there are several organizations that are working side by side with the Warnock campaign. So you can give your time and talent to Working Families of Georgia. They are doing text banking right now. And text banking, y'all, you can sit down and literally text 4,000 people in 45 minutes. It's a really fantastic medium that we're using, and it's easy. Fair Fight is both phone banking and texting for the Warnock campaign. The New Georgia is doing canvassing, so you can canvass with the New Georgia Project. And Georgia Stand Up is also canvassing. So if you want, you can also donate money to any one of those organizations, or you can also donate money to Black Voters Matter. They are taking money to help support a ground game as well. So some fantastic organizations that are working right now.
Well, good deal. And if you, we'll put some links also to some other opportunities directly with the campaign to either canvas or to go out. But just remember, we got to turn out. Grab a friend, grab somebody you don't like. They don't have to be a friend. Grab a coworker, whatever you have to do to get out and vote. And keep following us on Facebook, on Twitter. If we get information about this litigation that opens up Saturday voting, what a lot of counties are doing, and I know Fulton and Cobb have done this, as they've passed their resolutions to get the early voting for Sunday through Friday, the 27th through through December 2nd, they've also passed resolutions that would permit Saturday voting if the judge comes back and says that's permissible. So as long as that ruling is favorable, what a lot of counties have done is put that trigger in place to go ahead and do it. So we got to make sure that we get as many people the opportunity to vote, have the access to vote. So as I said earlier, make a plan, talk through it with your family, talk through it with your boss, make sure you're checking your schedule for the week of the 27th, so that you can have that time to make sure that you can go vote. We are so close, people. Nicole read the numbers earlier, and this election night, we were less than 0.6% from clinching this outright. And so we just got to show up, and that's not even including, I mean, when you look at some of the turnout, and I was looking at it earlier, but just in Cobb County alone, we had really, really low turnout in some areas where we typically do a lot better. I mean, I think it was one precinct we were down 25% from our norm. No, it was, and these were Democratic precincts that did not have the turnout that we need. And so we've got to get energized. Remember, we joked in 2021, and you remember all this, Nicole, where Georgia's going to save democracy. Well, we got to do it again. It sucks, but we've got to do it again, and we've got to show up. We've got to be there. We've got to be ready to get things done. So we just wanted to come to you tonight really quick to explain what's going on with the runoff, what's going on with the litigation, to encourage you to, I love what you said, Nicole, your time, your treasure, your talents, whatever you need to do. And I know a lot of people, like to write postcards and other stuff. Nicole, we talked about it. You're like, yeah, probably not the best way to spend, use your time.
Y'all, it's not, I would rather you text bank. And if you're like, I just don't want to get on the phone, I don't want to see people, text bank. And the reason why I'm saying that is postcards are new. And there has been a little bit of research done on them, and they don't make three campaigns were followed, and in one campaign there wasn't a statistical significant difference. It was a little bit positive, but it wasn't a significantly statistical difference to be like, oh, this worked. In another campaign they followed, voter turnout was actually down. So, and the third was a wash. So your time is precious. If instead of postcard writing right now, until we know more, texting is something that we know works, that there's more research on. So I may not be popular with some of our
plus time
for saying that.
Plus time. We just don't have time, right? We just don't have time right now. It's time. Time's running out. Everybody's got family coming in town. You're going to be leaving town next week. So let's do what matters. Let's do what we can to turn out the vote. And Nicole and I will see you next week, where we'll get into some of the leadership issues that are going. We'll at that point know the House and Senate leadership for both parties. We know that John Burns will likely be the Speaker of the House now that Ralston's retired.
I saw an AJC article. That's the case. He's been voted.
Yeah. Yep, they voted, so he is the nominee, and will likely have the votes on the floor to be Speaker. And we'll be doing our Democratic House elections next Tuesday. So all to say, Thank you for listening. Go out and vote, and we will see you guys on the next episode of Policy Matters.
Bye, everyone.
Bye now.